Welcome back, everybody. I'm always glad to have everybody here for Children's Church here at Christ Community Church of Ocala. Today is part 2 of one of my favorite stories in the whole Old Testament. Part 2. No, it's actually this many. Part 2. It's the story of how in the beginning God worked in a very troubled family. This is part 2 of the story of Joseph the dreamer. Remember from last week how Israel, the father of 12 sons, well, he had all these sons, but he played favorites. He had a favorite son named Joseph. He gave him this beautiful coat of many colors. Remember that one? And he was the daddy's favorite. He was a little baby, but his brothers hated his guts because of it. Well, as you can see, he told them some dreams, remember? And these dreams, they were all bowing down to him. Well, they hated his guts to begin with, and being told that they were going to all bow down to him, well, I'm sure that made them hate him more. And you know it, they did. In fact, they hated him so much that they sold him as a slave into Egypt. Not a good bunch of brothers. What's more, they made it worse because they convinced Daddy that he'd been killed by animals. They took that coat of many colors and they tore it up and they covered it in blood, and his daddy believed that he had been killed and was gone. How sad. Well, he got down to Egypt. He was sold to Potiphar, this captain of the guard, but he decided to be good and faithful. Everything he did was blessed. His master Potiphar became very rich. It was a good thing, but his wife was checking him out and wanted to do lots of bad things. And Joseph would have nothing to do with her. Nothing. He loved God and he was faithful. He was doing what was right because he loved God. And well, one day, he kept telling her, no, won't do anything wrong with you. Won't do it. You can't make me. So she couldn't make him, so she decided to try and trick him. She waited till everybody was out, and then she said, come, do something bad with me. And he said, no, 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 no. And she grabbed his coat, and he couldn't get free, so he took the coat off, and he ran out of the house without the coat. Well, she had had enough. He wouldn't do what was bad, so she decided she was going to hurt him. She told her husband that it was Joseph who was doing the wrong things. It was Joseph, the guy he put in charge of everything, was trying to do bad stuff with her. Well, it didn't turn out good because at least he believed her enough to send him to prison. And while he was in prison, the guy who was in charge of the prison, he was watching Joseph and he noticed everything that Joseph did was blessed. So he put Joseph in charge of the whole prison. See? He was still being blessed. He was still being faithful. Well, one day, 2 very special prisoners arrived. A guy who was the chief butler and the chief baker to the Pharaoh himself. These guys had done something that made him mad, so he stuck them into prison. Well, while they were in prison, Joseph was put in charge of them, and one day they both had a really disturbing dream. Remember, Joseph was good with dreams. So, the butler told Joseph his dream. He says, in my dream, I saw 3 branches with grapes on them. And I grabbed the grapes and I squeezed them into the cup and I gave the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph said, okay. Well, here's what the dream means. He says, the dream means in 3 days, you're going to get your job back. You're going to be the chief butler to the Pharaoh again. Well, the chief butler was thrilled. He said, this is wonderful. So the chief baker, he says, oh, I bet I'm going to get a good one too. So he asks Joseph, okay, can you interpret my dream? Here's my dream. I had 3 baskets on my head, and the baskets all had bread in it. And on the top basket, these birds were eating the bread off the top basket. What does my dream mean? He's really excited. He's hoping it's good. And Joseph tells him, well, here's what it means. In 3 days, Pharaoh's going to cut your head off and stick it on a pole. That's not good. Yeah, that's not good. But Joseph talked to these guys, and he talked to the chief butler who was about to get his job back, according to the dream. He said, please, when you get your job back, would you please tell the Pharaoh about me? Because, well, I'm in prison for no good reason. I didn't do anything wrong. Please remember me to the Pharaoh. Please. And the chief butler said, sure, okay, sure, I'll do that. Well, guess what happened in 3 days? Boom! The chief butler got his job back! Yay! And the chief baker got his head stuck on a pole. He's dead. No good. Well, the chief butler didn't remember about Joseph. In fact, he forgot about him for 2 whole years. 2 more years he was in prison. Well, after 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream himself. In his dream, he saw 7 big fat cows. They were really good, and they were nice, and they were healthy. And then 7 skinny cows came up and ate them. And when the skinny cows ate them, you still couldn't tell. They were still skinny cows. Then he had another dream that same night where there was 7 big, beautiful grains of wheat. 7 of them. And then there was 7 weak, ugly ones, all burned up by the wind. And the 7 ugly ones ate the 7 big ones. And when they were done, you still couldn't tell. They were still ugly. Well, when the chief butler heard this, the chief butler remembered, wait a second. There was a guy in prison who knew how to talk about dreams and understand them, interpret them. Oh boy, maybe I should tell the Pharaoh. So he calls Pharaoh over and he says, Pharaoh, there's this guy in prison, this Jew, this Hebrew. He knew all about dreams and he can interpret them. He interpreted my dream and the chief baker's dream, and they all came true. Maybe we should go get him. Pharaoh says, that's a good idea. So he sends to the prison and he says, get Joseph over here. I want to talk to him. So they cleaned him up and they shaved him and they put some good clothes on him, and he went over to the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked him, Joseph, can you interpret my dreams? And Joseph said, of course not. I can't interpret dreams, but there is a God in heaven who can. See, he's going to give credit to God. He won't even take credit for himself. That's a good, wise man. Well, Pharaoh tells him the dreams. He's like, here's my dreams. Got 7 fat cows, 8 by 7 skinny cows. Then I had 7 beautiful, big, full heads of grain. They were eaten by 7 little skinny ones. And when it was all said and done, the skinny cows were still skinny and the bad grain was still bad. What does this mean? And Joseph told him, the meaning of the dreams is this. Kind of both the dreams are the same. It means there's about to be 7 years where there'll be great abundance. Lots of animals being grown, lots of wheat being grown. It's going to be a beautiful time of lots and lots of stuff. But after that 7 years, there's going to be 7 years of famine and drought. And it'll be so bad that the 7 years of abundance won't even be remembered. Wow. Okay, that was the interpretation of the dream. But he went on. He said, what you should do, Pharaoh, you should find somebody who can gather up all of the stuff during the 7 good years and save it for the bad years and save people's lives. Well, Pharaoh said, well, that's a great idea. I choose you because nobody in my whole kingdom is as wise as you. You're the only one who would understand my dreams. You seem to be the guy for the job. So he put his ring on him and he put a cloak on him and he gave him a beautiful ride in his chariot, made him second in charge of all of Egypt. Well, being good and God being faithful, guess what Joseph did? He went right to work. He started delegating and sending people out and gathering all the extra stuff. When the wheat fields would be filled, he would take it and he put some of it into storage. And each year, year after year, more and more grain was being stored. They had entire cities that they were only filled with all this grain and food. In fact, there was so much that they couldn't even count it anymore. There was a gazillion, bajillion, florgazillion tons of it. There was so much grain, they couldn't even count it. Well, guess what? After those 7 great years, he was ready for the bad times to begin. And sure enough, the 7 years of abundance ended, and the 7 years of famine began. No water, it was a drought, no crops were being harvested. And when that happened, Joseph ordered that the storehouses full of all this food he'd been saving was opened, and they started to give out food to the people who were starving because of the drought and famine. Well, guess what happened when people were coming to get food from Joseph? One day, he sees his own brothers, the ones who had sold him as a slave, the ones who threw him into the cistern, the one who hated his guts. I wonder what he's going to do. See, Joseph remembered all of these bad things that his brothers had done. He remembered the hurt and the hate and the pain and the suffering and the years in prison. All this was their fault. I wonder what he's going to do. Well, next week we will find out when we finish the story of Joseph the Dreamer. But for today, I wonder, what have we learned from Joseph and what has happened to him? Well, first we learned that you shouldn't let the past wrongs that were done to you affect your present. Yes, Potiphar's wife lied, but he didn't let that affect him. He was still good and loved God and was faithful in the prison. You also learned that you should be faithful in all that you do. He was faithful in Potiphar's house. He was faithful in the prison. That's wise and godly. Then you should remember the good in your life. Yeah, it wasn't great in prison, but he knew that God was in charge, and good things had happened to him, and good things were probably going to come. That's faith. And we should remember to give God credit for all the good things in our lives, just like Joseph did. Our memory verse reminds us of what Joseph did, because the Lord was with Joseph and he gave him success in whatever he did. You find that in Genesis 39:23. That's our story for today. Next week we finish it up to see what Joseph did with his brothers. But for now, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Father, thank you that we can see how Joseph was loving and honest and godly and faithful. May we be like him and be blessed by you in all that we do. In Jesus' name. And everybody says, amen. See you guys next week for the conclusion of this great story of Joseph. Bye.